President Biden is set to give his first State of the Union address tonight. The White House says the president will focus on increasing domestic manufacturing and strengthening supply chains, reducing costs for families and the deficit, promoting competition to lower prices, and, quote, eliminating barriers to good-paying jobs. But the president is also facing a foreign policy crisis as the U.S. and its allies confront Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, and the administration is still grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic as mask mandates are being lifted across the country, including for tonight's speech in the Capitol. Let's bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein, along with former Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota and Barbara Comstock, a former Republican Congresswoman from Virginia. Thank you all for being here this morning. Rick, I want to start with you. President Biden's approval ratings have fallen in his first year, mainly driven by his handling of the crisis in Afghanistan. Our most recent ABC News and Washington Post poll shows 37% of Americans approve of his job performance so far. So how do you think this new conflict in Ukraine will affect the State of the Union speech and also his approval?
Diane, no question this speech will be a lot different than it would have been had it been delivered just a couple of weeks ago. This crisis in Ukraine is the dominating issue on the world stage. People will be watching not just the United States, but around the world to see how the president responds. But it's interesting. A couple of Democrats that I've been talking to say that they hope that this provides an opportunity for something of a reset, that Ukraine has provided as close to a unifying moment as you can get in this country. The President Biden is on the stage, shares a stage now with the vast majority not only of Americans, but in the world community, in isolating Putin. By the way, former President Trump is one of the few voices that's voicing support at all for President Putin, and that President Biden can combine that with some aspects of his domestic agenda and foreign policy agenda to talk about the importance of democracy both here and abroad. It's an issue that he's hit before, and if he uses that to sort of reframe this next phase of his presidency, mindful of those abysmal approval ratings, and they are pretty bad, then he's got a template for the Democratic Party that needs some new direction and maybe some more focus in the year ahead.
Now, Barbara, President Biden has been in lockstep with U.S. allies on the response to Russia's aggression. So has the administration done enough, in your opinion?
Well, I think this has been a very clarifying moment for the world where they have united, and obviously things like sharing the intelligence with President Zelensky and with the European Union, uniting the European Union, and having the people come out so strongly in support of Ukraine. You've had, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. And so I think President Biden has this unique moment of unity on the foreign policy front to clarify what he is going to do now, make it clear that unlike Donald Trump, who said, I have no message for Putin, we have a strong message for Putin. We're going to stand with Putin. We're going to stand with those soldiers on Stake Island, on those civilian men and women who are taking up arms, on those moms who are having their babies in bomb shelters. And when he talks about that kind of unifying force and then shifts it over to say, listen, if we can unify there, instead of having these voices of division, we've got to come together, which is what he governed on and why he won. And really, he needs to have sort of a sister soldier moment where he turns to both the left and the right and says, no more, we can't do this. Americans are suffering too, and we need to take that spirit of what President Zelensky is doing, willing to risk his own life. Well, how about if some of our members of Congress are willing to risk their political fortunes in order to get things done for the American people? I think if he works with people like Mitt Romney and Susan Collins, maybe work with Lisa Murkowski on getting more energy from Alaska, work with the problem solvers in the House, he has a great moment to turn things around. And I say that as a Republican.
Heidi, what do you think of the administration's response, and what lessons do you think they've learned from the Afghanistan crisis with this response?
Well, I want to say amen to Barbara. I hope they're listening to her. She's always been great counsel, and I think has outlined exactly what the president needs to do. When you look at Ukraine, I think that no one should underestimate how difficult it is to get unity, especially on sanctions when it's going to affect Europe in a dramatic way. Sanctions don't work. People keep saying, well, why don't we do this and why don't we do that? Sanctions only work when you unify our allies and when we bring everybody together to fight this cause. And I think that the president gets high marks for leading a global coalition, economic coalition against against Putin. I don't say the Russians because there's plenty of Russians who disagree with what Putin is doing right now. I think he needs more symbolic measures, like kicking all the oligarchs out of America, seizing their property, being very, very direct that we're going to go after the money, after the ill-gotten gains, and then making sure that we get an oil and gas policy that recognizes the need for energy security in Europe. And he needs to talk about that tonight.
And so the pandemic, of course, is also still top of mind for many Americans, especially since it's still affecting our day-to-day lives in many parts. That same ABC News Washington Post poll shows 44% of Americans approve of the president's handling of the pandemic, while 50% disapprove. So, Rick, how will the president address the pandemic tonight?
It's interesting because the first time that President Biden went to a joint session of Congress after his first 100 days, he came pretty close to declaring victory, talking about how you can start to see the smile on children's faces again. Of course, many children in the country are still masked in their schools, but we are at a phase now where it does seem like we're coming out of it. And this was a high point for the president up until recently. The last couple of months, you've started to see a disconnect between this White House, this administration, many Democrats, and the take of most Americans. The majority now disapproving of his handling, and I think that reflects too much caution or a caution that outstrips the willingness of Americans to go along with it. Now, you still have 8 months before the election. You've got a chance to change perceptions around this. The reality of COVID is a lot different, but the chamber itself will look different with a lot fewer masks.
Now, Barbara, we have seen frustration over mask mandates, vaccine mandates, especially in Republican-leaning parts of the country. So what does President Biden's message to these people need to be tonight?
Well, he needs to speak to those parents who are very frustrated that their kids have had such struggles over the past 2 years. I mean, it's not just in red states. San Francisco just got, a recall on their school board. So I think he has to have a post-pandemic message of, we hear you, we know it's tough, we're going to have remedial efforts for these kids, we're going to get them back in school, the masks are coming off, and we're going to have a post-pandemic world economy and schools.
And, of course, the pandemic had a huge impact on the economy. The Ukraine crisis is also now doing the same. Gas prices are up. Inflation has been soaring. Our ABC News Washington Post poll shows just 37% of Americans approve of his handling of the economy, with 58% disapproving. So, Rick, how does he address the economy and inflation tonight, which was downplayed for so long?
Yeah, I think he has to acknowledge it, and we're told by the White House he's going to use the word inflation to talk about it. It's not just about controlling costs. It's recognizing the pain in people's lives. I was struck, and I know a lot of Democrats that I've talked to were struck by an op-ed that David Axelrod published a few weeks ago where he said there's no use trying to jawbone the American people. You have to acknowledge their pain. A lot of Democrats in the White House don't like that, but the acknowledgement has to be there.
So, Heidi, how does he get Democrats to unite behind his economic plan tonight? And is there any hope of selling his economic plans to the right?
I think he picks 2 or 3 very popular measures like controlling drug prices, like looking at what he's going to do on energy prices. And he talks about specifics on what he's going to do to control prices for the American public, whether it's daycare, energy, or health care.
All right, Barbara Comstock, Heidi Heitkamp, Recline. We appreciate it. Thank you. And ABC News Live will bring you full coverage of President Biden's first State of the Union address tonight, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.